What if I told you the laws of physics were literally being destroyed?
I'd say you were going crazy.
Maybe I am crazy. This was supposed to be our timeline.
And somehow we ended up over here.
This isn't a glitch. Let it go. I'm gonna need someone who isn't afraid of risk.
Fry!
Listen to me very carefully.
I'm gonna get you out.
So scientists are now saying that there are a series of baffling incidents that appear to defy the known laws of physics.
The math doesn't add up anymore, which means someone, something, is changing the math.
It's like they built a back door into the universe.
Uh-oh.
Hello, Neil. Time to divide everything by 0. Ha 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 ha.
Dude, we're gonna die! Let me think, motherfucker.
Oh, shit.
Stop them. They're getting away.
To be honest, this whole theory sounds pretty out there.
You really shouldn't have called me, Neil.
You don't understand. He's collapsing the goddamn multiverse. I'm not going back, Neil!
Send in the fucking drones.
So it was all a big fat lie! I thought I told you to shut him down.
It's not what you think.
Ouch. Not the Nutella. I'm allergic.
Welcome to the shit show. My name's Andrew Edwards. I'm just Neil deGrasse Tyson is our hero. Action hero is a pretty funny start. Richard?
My name is Richard Busolato. This Friday I'm in Stockholm, but you still find me in the middle of the screen.
And my name is Joe Augustin, and welcome to the shit show. It's the Friday octagon where the week's worst ideas enter, common sense taps out, and somehow the plastics, pandemics, billionaires, glaciers, elections, oil markets, masculinity influences, and possibly a venomous Singapore jellyfish ends up fighting for the same collapsing spotlight. This afternoon, we're also going to be talking about DEI in a post-woke world where apparently the global poly crisis wasn't busy enough, being the simultaneous occurrence of several catastrophic events all happening at the same time. Climate breakdown, disease outbreaks, democratic decay, media myopia, geopolitical madness, food insecurity, AI eating search, and men taking medical advice from people who use the word ballmaxxing without immediately being launched into the sun. So to introduce you a little bit to our speaker today, who's going to join us and be hopefully the voice of some reason. Our guest has spent more than 3 decades working in a global leadership development, helping organizations build cross-cultural competencies, accelerate the journey towards gender equality, and develop more inclusive and responsible leaders. She's the author of The Culture Key, managing partner of Developing Global Leaders Asia, and someone sitting right at the edge of the global DEI backlash. Please welcome a huge fan of Donald Trump, Susanna Tongli, PhD.
Thank you very much. And I hope everybody got the sarcasm in that last sentence.
Maybe. But Susanna, the other thing that is probably worth highlighting is you're Hungarian. So you were quite happy recently, weren't you?
You don't know how happy I was. And I just wish I had been in Hungary jumping up and down with the millions of people when our new government or new party, basically the DISA party, won. And after 16 years, the Orbán government had to retire. Now it's an amazing change. And actually, you know, I'm going to talk about the power of leadership later on. And I think now Hungary showed that even though leaders can be extremely powerful and perhaps not so good all the time, if the people really, really want change and there is some democracy still there, then actually you can change systems. So yes, I'm every Hungarian, and most Hungarians are a much happier people now.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was a great day. And especially, is it the finance minister who's turned out to be a fantastic dancer?
I like
Where do you
that
find this?
and you know, that's one of the things is that the new government and the people who joined the party and the government, they seem to be just normal people who, at least they say, but I even believe them, they genuinely want to serve the people rather than be their ultimate leaders.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments, apart from the dancing, was when he went on the media, the national broadcast media, and basically said, "You guys are done." I thought that was absolutely perfect. So it gave us a real sense of. Yeah, no, it was. I'm looking forward to a similar backlash, potentially in the US. But anyway, we live in hope. But anyway, so we'll get started because we've got a lot that we're going to try and achieve today. Because there's always, as usual, a lot going on. But Susanna, just give us a little bit more context around your past and what you've been doing.
Okay, so as you already mentioned, I'm Hungarian, so I was born in a small Hungarian town, but my journey has led to many, many different countries, which was my childhood dream. So I'm living my dream. I lived in Italy, US, Switzerland, the UK. I'm probably forgetting some countries, Thailand, and finally I arrived here in Singapore 16 years ago. And, you know, my mom used to say that I have an overdeveloped sense of fairness. Apparently, as a small kid, I used to go around and tell everybody, you were right, you were wrong, that's not right. And so everybody really loved that. And to be honest, I don't think I changed that much. And I think what is really wonderful, and what, if you ask me also like, what inspires me, it's really when I see that people live their values. And for me, the most important values is fairness and equality still, even as a grown-up. And that's why I also love what I do. That's why I love what we do in our organization, you know, supporting the other companies become more fair, more equitable. And so that's why I'm, I think, a very lucky person who is living, who is able to live her values through her work as well.
Yeah. No, I forgot to put you in the spotlight, so I'll do that next. But I've seen you work, and I've been lucky to be involved with some of the events that you do, and I know what you achieve. But obviously, since the Trump administration came into its second term, the whole DEI focus, you know, I remember sending out an alert to one of our communities: if you're anywhere in the DEI space, keep your eyes open. It's going to come and impact you. And within 24 hours, Heather Hansen reached out to me and told me she had a contract cancelled. So just what's it been like for you? It's been, almost a year and a half. Yeah. How has it impacted you, but also the clients that you work with and the businesses and the prioritization of DEI, because it was a big focus and now it seems like everyone's saying, oh, well, we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because our company's name is Developing Global Leaders. So that's what we're doing. And part of global leadership is inclusive leadership, gender equality, and more cross-cultural competence for global business success. And for a lot of companies, it all went under inclusion or DEI when that was getting a bit more established. Now, what happened at the beginning of 25 was impacting us and me personally on various levels. On the personal level, you know, you just heard what I said about my values and etc. I don't think I ever felt such a huge disappointment and frustration. Finally, when the world seemed to be aligned and ready for what I wanted to help with, suddenly my world turned upside down. So that's the personal side. Our little company, the leadership development, I think, suffered the same way as many other companies. We actually got hit 3 levels. So because we are also focusing on inclusion, of course, the attack on DEI was the number one. But then, alongside with all the, I think, other people development companies, the war, first the tariffs, then the war, so the economic uncertainty that hit us again. And there is a third hit as well, that because companies don't have money, or they have all this uncertainty, and they still have to do something about AI, they think. Therefore, any budget left is put towards AI. So nothing is left to inclusion, if you want. And what we've seen on our small scale in our organization, we have seen in our clients, unfortunately, as well, because mainly US companies, but also companies who have major markets in the US, or companies who didn't quite believe in it, and they took it as a good reason to go along with the attack. And there are a lot of companies who dismantle their DEI practices. They stop their diversity-specific programs. They even stopped measuring diversity numbers. And apart from all the economic impact, I think what a waste of energy and time, because I met clients who said their job was literally for months deleting strategies from their computers and websites. So it hasn't really been great. And I still meet a lot of clients who want to do something, but it's we have to work much harder for our business, that's for sure. And I think every single company is in that space now.
Yeah, I think the point about it's American companies, but also companies that work with American companies, the impact's been a lot bigger. So when you think about the future, what's your biggest fear?
So personally, I am for my work, I'm fine, because so one of the things which actually has been a positive is that cross-cultural competence building, which actually is one of my biggest focus, has got a bit more interest in the last 2, 3, 4 years, even, I would say. And while some companies pushed cross-cultural competence under DEI, I'm very happy to see that it didn't stay there, because it's a basic business skill. So that is still happening. My biggest fear is that because of all this stopping or renaming DEI into something else, because of all this, the focus is going to be lost on, I like to talk about actually inclusion. And if there is no focus, DEI basically, in my belief, it really has been a wonderful thing, or is a wonderful thing, because the main objective is to create equal opportunities for everyone. And then for that, sometimes or often you need equitable support. So it's really a wonderful thing for business, for economy, for people's lives. And if there is no focus on it, because suddenly it's not called DEI, but it's called respect for everyone or something similar, or good culture, then maybe it will disappear. That's my biggest fear. And if it disappears, then all the benefits, the wonderful things disappear. And even if it doesn't quite disappear, which I am hopeful for, how do we know what's happening if companies are not allowed to measure progress on their diversity numbers? Without measuring, you don't know where you are.
Yeah, right. Richard, I've muted you because you had some background noise that was going on, just so you know. All right, so equality is something that I've always been passionate about, because I understand its benefit, right? Everyone benefits with equality, including men. So when people are fighting against equality, especially if it's men, they're actually fighting against their own interests. And when powerful men are doing it, they're actually fighting against the interests of the men that revere them, right? So it's one of those frustrations for me. But if we get specific about it, because I know that DEI is that's not what this is about. This is something, it's not separate. It's all inclusive. But if we continue down this path, and we're hearing that young Gen Alpha males are more misogynistic than boomers in a lot of Western democracies, and we're seeing it the whole manosphere, although I'm seeing a backlash to that from men, which I'm really pleased about. But if from a climate perspective, making sure that we're making the right decisions, I always say that men, women, minorities, and our Indigenous brothers and sisters need to be at every table where decisions are being made or the wrong decisions will be made. So from your perspective and the work that you do, what are the outcomes if we go backwards? Because we've come so far forwards and now we're going backwards. But what does that mean? What are the real outcomes?
If we start on the humanity level, because I think that is perhaps the biggest one. Inclusion is really helping supports people to become their best selves, because it allows them to feel safe. It allows them, it invites them to share their thoughts, their opinions. So on a human level, it's a fantastic empowering tool or way to do. And if we take it away, then the opposite is going to be true. And maybe if I can come to gender equality for a moment, because there are more numbers presented, because it's easier to, I guess, to measure gender equality. The World Economic Forum produces a global gender gap report, I think now for the past like 18 or so years. And they every year say how many trillions the global economy would become richer if we would close that gender gap. So if we stop that initiative, then we look at the economic impact is huge. It's not going to be realized all that potential. So we had the human element, and then we had the economic element as well. Now, if we go even further, because we talked about how things are getting taken away and reduced. I just read an article about this one was about the US, and the US is now sadly pretty good for any bad examples. So I will come to other parts of the world for some good examples. But I just read that in the federal workforce, within just 1 year, 91,000 Black women were fired or let go. And it was interesting because we don't necessarily think it through. But what the article said, that their salary was, although less than the men's, but it was relatively higher than the private economies. So now all these women have to go into the private economy, which means that by default, their salaries will probably be about 20% less. Now, these women typically spend their money locally, mostly, or a lot of them do so. So they will not have as much money, therefore they will not spend as much in the local economy. Hence the impact on the economy coming back as well. So, this human element of please let me be who I really am and want to be is so strongly connected to then the economic outcomes as well. So that's a bad example. Good example, and I'm European, so I'm clearly biased because I know Australia also has some good initiatives. But for example, in Europe, we also have a gender gap. The general gender gap is about 11%. But what they looked at is that for the pensioners, women, it's 25%. Oh. So because we have smaller amounts, it adds up. And by the time we retire, women are much poorer than men. So one of the things which now the EU will oblige all the members is that they will have to share information on salaries. So it will be a huge requirement for transparency, and they will have to take action if the gender pay gap exceeds 5%. So because it creates the structural environment, and it's you have to do it if you're a member of the EU. Therefore, my hope is that in Europe, at least, maybe we will not slow down that gender equality, but in the US, it's not a question. So I think in some regions, it will be still a bit better. In other regions, it will be devastating for a lot of people. And not just for women, but minorities. Of course, Black women, my example, had double disadvantage as well.
So the 25% for female pensioners would also be linked to the fact that they live longer too, right?
I must say I did not check the data.
Okay.
I would have hoped that they accounted for it,
Yeah.
but I'm not quite sure.
What about in Asia? Is there any? I know the Philippines was in the top 5 there for a while for women's equality. Are there any standouts?
Culture, yes, and I think quite a few years I've been looking at the data, and Philippines have been top from the Asian countries. For me, it kind of makes sense if you look at cultures. How cultures are will have an impact on everything. How they deal with policies and decisions as well. And the Filipino culture puts quite a big emphasis on the woman, especially on the mother, but not just the mother, but the woman themselves. So it's very normal for a Filipino lady to speak up, because that's what they always do at home, at work. Philippines always the highest, and Japan is typically one of the lowest in Asia.
Yeah.
Singapore is, I think it's about 40th in the world. So it's in Asia, it's more on towards the top, but not on the top.
Okay. So DEI. Let's focus on DEI and why it's so important. And if we take our eye off it, what do we lose?
I keep coming back to it because I really think that that's the most important part. My philosophy is that humans should be respected simply because they were born. So therefore, everybody should be respected as a person. And DEI helped that. It helped create equal opportunities for everybody by often providing this equitable support. It was wonderful because it really brings the diversity of thoughts together, whether it's different backgrounds, whether it's different gender, different ability, different people simply have different ways of thinking. And there's a lot of research which shows that there will be more engagement, there will be more productivity, more innovation, etc., if we are also creating an inclusive environment. Because just because we are diverse, it doesn't mean that people feel safe and empowered. But if we have together with the inclusion, then it's beautiful. So we would lose all that. We would lose that creativity, that extra engagement. There are even studies which show that companies where the top leadership team is more diverse, they actually outperform those companies where the top leadership team is much less diverse. So there's so much business case. That's the businesses, but I really am worried about the homes and communities that focus is gone. So there's going to be less talk about equality, fairness, inclusion, and I don't know whether we will remember, because I'm not sure that we are at that turning point where the gender equality changes would just continue by themselves. I don't think we are there yet, and certainly not for inclusion or DEI in general.
Yeah, I want to focus on it. So I remember working for a company, and at one period there was a whole bunch of guys from Latin America in the leadership team, and they dominated, and they hired Latin American guys, and this is here in Singapore, and then the senior person was taken over by an Indian national, and then a whole bunch of Indian guys not girls were hired. And then the next stage was a Singaporean leadership team that brought in a whole bunch of Singaporeans, and I just remember just looking at it because it was so obvious, the lack of diverse thinking, right? And I think that's maybe something. I mean, Richard, you've had an experience where with diversity, especially in the work that you've done, where if you hire people just like you, it doesn't bring much to the table. Do you want to share it?
For me, it's very simple, and I have been in positions when I was hiring teams and running teams, and first, let me start with the caveat that I am fiercely competitive and hate losing. Okay, that's good to understand in this context. So if you know you like winning, you're going to go to quite extreme lengths to make sure you win. So I'm going to put together the absolutely best team I can put together. I'm going to work with the people that make me the best version of myself. And it's a pretty lousy idea to hire people like me, because all I get surrounded by then are like-minded, versions of myself saying, "Oh, you're thinking right, you're great, I think exactly like you," instead of having people around you with a very different mindset that will prompt you, question you, and always force you into this kind of critical thinking phase, saying, is this really the best use of the money we can put it to at the moment? Rather than having a cheerleading choir around you saying, yeah, let's go for it. You're the man. And that comes very, very naturally to me. Because at the end of the day, it's not really that fun to work with yourself either. So why would I want to surround myself by people who have gone to the same schools, have had the same upbringing, come from roughly the same background environment, having done a similar journey through working life? That for me is really, really, really basic. And it just makes you better at what you do. And I'm really interested in being better at what I do.
Yeah, I think you're quite unusual, Richard, quite open-minded, but we've seen it in the media. I mean, most of the case studies actually come out of the UK. The London type sort of converge on the mainstream media, and but they don't have that working class perspective to bring the real richness and flavour to the actual news. So it's it's like as Steve said, it's like equality is good for everyone, diversity and inclusion is good for everyone, including the company. And I just find it incredible that we're still here. Anyway, Susan, any thoughts?
Yeah, yes, I think unfortunately you're not the typical guy in that respect, because and I'd like to point out that my husband luckily isn't like that either. That's why I think he actually can be my husband. And actually, I mean that actually. But it's the bias. It's because it sounds like you are self-reflective, you're thinking about it, you have an objective, etc. But I think, especially in this crazy fast world, everybody is more acting on autopilot. So basically, just doing the best next quick decision, and hopefully it will be the best. And when we do that, we know from neuroscience that basically we are biased, because we are basically repeating the patterns which we have seen around ourselves. And what did the Latin American person see before came to Singapore, or the Latin American leaders? Why would he bring them here? Because he trusts them. He trusts them. He actually believes that he will get the best outcome from them, because he's not aware of the fact that diversity would be better. So he surrounds himself with the Latin Americans, or the Indian with the Indians, because they trust each other, because they are a bit similar culturally, of course, not everybody, but as a whole, more similar than others. And it's easier to communicate with each other, much easier. It's a little bit, as you said as well, like talking to a mirror. You have a fantastic, great conversation because you all agree about things. Of course, it's not going to get the best outcome, but it feels extremely comfortable. And if nobody points that out to these leaders, they just believe that's the best thing. And then maybe if I just may add something to this, then you could hear comments like that from somebody from Europe or from Latin America working in Asia, that, oh, we have to find another person from outside Asia because there is no good successor for the APAC leadership roles in Asia. And you go like, how can you even say that sentence out loud? But people do.
Yeah. And then you think about that mirror. To me, it's like AI is going to make that sort of on steroids.
I love AI. I love using AI, but I'm very worried about AI because I don't trust us that we will be patient or intelligent enough to check all the data input. We will be so happily using what's already there and then focus on the quick outcome that we will not take the time, at least that's my fear, that we will not take the time to check what's the input without bias.
Yeah. And the input is historical data, not future data, so it naturally picks up the bias, which is one of the earliest issues that were raised with it. Oh, sorry. Yep.
So may I just say one thing? My husband was just doing a presentation, and he was extremely impressed by the tool he was using, and he added some pictures, and he wanted business, didn't specify anything first, just business pictures. It was all white men sitting around the table.
Yeah.
Then it changed as soon as it was requested to do something else, but the default was white people sitting around the table.
Yeah.
Can I be the diverse voice amongst this discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
So the challenge I think the world faces, or why DEI is in the space it is right now, is because it's a good idea that was perhaps wielded in the wrong hands or in clumsy hands. You know, I put it akin to this. I mean, you've all met the friend who's just become a vegan, right? You're not necessarily, and with apologies to the vegans who are watching right now, you're not necessarily keen to be around them because they're just like over the top on everything. That thing there, you can bring it back, and you can wind up. You go like, everything in this house is just terrible because in some way, some creature was hurt by it. You know, and we seem to be okay with killing plants, but you know that sort of thing. So that there is a thing where when DEI is overclocked, I think that and by clumsy hands, that it causes resentment, it causes this pushback, right? So when I think about diversity and inclusion, for instance, there is this thing where we want to try to talk about equity and inclusion. You want to get you're trying to bring out the best in people. But when someone is clumsily using it, what happens is when you find yourself in an organization, you look left and right, and you go like, there's some people on this panel who are incompetent and are in here for a different reason than because they deserved it from a just purely qualifications point of view. And I know I'm going into dangerous territory right now, right? But I've been there where people have told me specifically that what they're doing with the decision regarding myself, because I'm an MC, for instance, and I do a lot of work, and there are times when literally what they're doing is they're thinking, okay, this person is really like the best person for the job, but the intervention comes in at a corporate level and says that no, optically it doesn't look right, and what they do is they bring somebody else to do the job, and you know, as to whether or not they do a better job, the reason why they chose someone else is just it was based on that. So yeah. I feel that there is the over DEIing of things that makes things difficult for the people who actually have a very, I mean, I'm all for the idea of equity and inclusion. I want to hear everyone's thoughts. I want to have everyone have a chance to do things. But when I feel the challenge that DEI as a practice faces is, how do you teach people to practice it in a way that, and this is from my dad who used to be a magistrate, is that there's a thing about justice. Justice needs to be done, and justice needs to be seen to be done as well. And I think when you talk about, for instance, global companies saying that DEI is a great thing, we're sort of discounting the times when homogeneity actually works really well. If you say it doesn't work and there's all the evidence of the contrary, then I give you the 300-year-old companies from Japan where they're extremely homogenous. But it's also the context of what they're doing. And I'm not saying that it's ideal, but I'm also at the same time having to go like, it's not completely true. It's not always just that DEI is great. If you're facing a common enemy, for instance, there's certain things about homogeneity that works really well. Like, you know, the Singapore Army is not going to be filled. I mean, in some sense, we do take people from all over the place, but in terms of the core decision makers, we're gonna want people who are just really true blue hardcore Singaporean, right? I mean, that's just kind of the thing. And you don't go like, well, that'd be a moment where you go like, we sort of like go, okay, I think this is not the time for a DEI discussion, especially if this is a tough time, right? So, you know, I'm kind of putting it back there. Is like I think there is kind of a rebalancing in the market in the sense that we hit an intolerable situation in the way DEI was being made. I think to the point that some people who are actually in DEI were watching other people in DEI going like, okay, that's a bit too much.
Yeah. So, Joe, I mean, you made some really interesting points, and it actually goes into the next question I was going to ask. But there was a lot of, so when you were talking about the panels, right? So the idea was to no longer have the manels, which was just all men, right? Because, you know, women have a point of view as well. And I totally agree with you on what you said, that sometimes it meant that not the best qualified person was put in the job just because they had to make the numbers, because, you know, that was what they committed to, which wasn't good. But at the same time, a lot of the people who were put into those roles to tick a box, but they weren't supported in those roles so that they could develop and become the best leader. So it was done to tick a box, but not done properly. And that was my next question to Susanna. Like, if we want to move forward, we've got to get it right. And there was a lot that was going wrong. So can we talk about what went wrong and what we need to get right?
No, absolutely. And I agree with that, for example, homogeneity can work. Homogeneity is actually much easier. And if you have the right leadership and the right objectives and the right type of task, then homogeneous groups work much better than diverse groups, because diverse groups only work better if you take the hard work of bringing everybody together so that actually you can reap the benefits of diversity. By itself, it doesn't necessarily happen. And unfortunately, I couldn't agree with you more that often DEI went too far. The only excuse I can bring up is perhaps that it's a relatively new field. And whenever something new happens, there are mistakes be made. While it was a lot of damage which happened during the initial subconscious bias programs, maybe I could be a bit more forgiving to that, because maybe people didn't know that they shouldn't be blaming people and giving like lists of 20 biases and bias-free everybody's eyes like closed because it was boring and unrelatable to real life. So that did a big damage, but maybe it was because that's how we started. But then some of the examples, like I was just told in the UK, there is a company where talking about vegans, in the canteen, they only have vegan food. Now imagine that. I don't even know whether they did a survey how many vegans there may be in an office. Who knows? Maybe there's none. But that was a DEI initiative. And of course, when things like that happen, which impose on everyday's life and pleasure, simple pleasures like eating, everybody will hate the source where it's coming from. So, and that I'm less forgiving for, because why do you do something silly like that? Would you do that in your family? The other thing which I don't forgive businesses easily for is compromising merit for targets or quotas. Because if we are truly saying that one of the business objectives is to create value for the organization, how can I put somebody in a job just because of the color or the background of that person, if that person is not cut out for the job? And unfortunately, I was told stories as well that somebody just got a job because she happened to be a woman or Black or Aboriginal. So there was some kind of background. And the way the stories seem to go, that those people who actually were really good, they were able to rise to the challenge. But there were, of course, others who were not ready yet. And then they were beautiful, inverted commas, examples for, you see what DEI does to performance and companies. So absolutely, I think it was not done right. And these were like the typical big mistakes. And I think these ones should have been avoided. Now, the other thing which I think actually is the biggest problem, and that's why I'm also worried that DEI or inclusion may not survive. Because if we say that we want the overall objective of DEI is to create equal opportunities for everyone, to uplift everyone, then basically you have to create that inclusive organizational culture. Otherwise, it's not going to work. But what do you do when you run a change management program? Well, you have this team, that team, you have a full project for a few years, serious milestones, etc. Feedback mechanism, all that. And then you expect that in 3-5 years' time, the change management program has successfully completed and everybody is on board and everything is now working well. I have not seen it executed like that in, I could almost say, any organization. So if I want a culture change, to have an inclusive organizational culture, you would think you would need top management commitment and a change management program in order to reach that inclusive organizational culture. And if you don't do that, then what happens is that you do an initiative here or there. Okay, maybe you will review your policies, which is a good thing. You will run subconscious bias programs, also a good thing. But if there is no top-level commitment, long-term plan, which doesn't depend on who happens to be in the CEO role or the DEI role, I sadly experienced a number of times that the person who was the advocate for DEI left. Sometimes it was the CEO himself, not herself, or a DEI head. Suddenly, it didn't matter how successful the programs were. People wanted to sign up for the next round, but there was no place to sign up for because the next leader didn't feel like they didn't prioritize that. So I think that is perhaps the biggest problem, that it's never been taken as a longer term initiative, but people try to do these quick fixes, and that's why we also had so many failures and mistakes.
And that senior leadership ownership, right? That's really critical.
You know, it's interesting because I've been in leadership development for so long now, 3 decades, but the inclusive leadership taught me really the importance of leadership, because it's also a relatively sensitive subject. For some reason, it's very interesting. People really don't want to be wrong about it. They don't mind being wrong about some other aspect of leadership, but in terms of inclusive, they take it very personally. If they feel they're not doing it right. And I always say actually that if the leader has a vision and cares, and that's connected to inclusion as well, then all good things can happen, that there will be these change management programs. But if the top leadership doesn't push for accountability at the lower levels as well, the future is not that great then, I think.
Yeah, it's such a interesting sort of wide. I was just reading the other day. It was one of the big banks in the US. Neurodivergent people, especially autistic people, are shown to be 40% more effective, and 94% of them stay in the job for the longer term. So companies like Palantir, Microsoft, SAP, all of these companies all over the world, there's examples of it. So from a DEI perspective, it sounds like neurodivergent people have got a place, but the wider DEI drive seems to be sort of falling off a cliff. Are you seeing that as well?
I see some good examples. So, for example, one of the companies, medium-sized companies here in Singapore, shared employing neurodivergent people, and one of them was autistic, the other one had a different condition. And what they found, that first of all, it wasn't easy, but they wanted to do it. So they made sure that they trained the people working, who were going to work with her. They really carved the job for this person, which she could do well. And they said that because they prepared it so well and really enforced all this in the organization, they felt that the whole culture became much more caring. Not just her immediate environment, but the whole company, because people started, saying hello to everybody, like she started doing that. And they just asked and summarized some things more, because these were some of the techniques they had to use with her. So the benefits are there. And I really don't know. I see these developments, but I think Singapore is one of the places which will be actually okay, because the government is really actively trying to push for further equity for a lot of different groups. So I think Singapore will be fine. But other places where they diminish the initiatives and the focus. So if there is no DEI person, who is going to find those neurodiverse people? Now, because it may have been the DEI person's job. If that responsibility goes away with the DEI person, will they continue? I hope so. Yeah. But so that's, I think it's kind of the theme of what I'm saying, is that my biggest fear is that the focus on doing these good things would be lost because of the environment.
Yeah. Yeah, it's okay. So I think this is a conversation we could have for hours, right, guys? Because it's so complex and big. All right. I think probably the last couple of years for you in particular has been pretty fascinating. As someone you're probably the most experienced person I know in this space, anywhere in the world. But because of the pushback, it's obviously made you very, very deeply reflective. And you've gone. I mean, you've known, every angle of this discussion for years, but you've also been building a new framework which you call CARE. Do you want to take us through CARE?
So basically, I was resisting trying to come up with a new framework, because I think I emphasized enough how much I believe in the importance of DEI and inclusion in particular. But with all this resistance and pushbacks, I was wondering whether we actually need a new framework, which perhaps resonates a little bit more with people. One reason actually I thought about it, which we haven't talked about yet, is the language of DEI. I always thought it was very complicated. And I'm a non-native English speaker. So, and I have been in this field, but there were words which really took me some time to understand. And those words are hard to the DEI. One of them is equity. And I'm not feeling ashamed to admit that it took me ages to really internalize it, because that concept didn't exist in my own language. So my head couldn't just grasp what it was. So I had to explain myself over and over what it is. And then finally, after I don't know how many repetitions, now I can say equity without having to think about what actually it is. And if I went through that, then a lot of other non-English speakers, or perhaps even some English speakers, went through. And I was thinking, can we have a different framework which is a bit more intuitive and is simpler to relate to? And that's how the CARE concept came to me. And the idea was that I would like everything to be practical, because I think a lot of people have good intentions, a lot of organizations have good intentions, but how we turn those aspirations, intentions into practical reality. So the CARE framework is, the abbreviation stands for challenge, ask, respect, and embrace. And the idea is that basically there's a more detailed description of the framework, where challenging, asking, respecting, and embracing will basically break down what you can do on the systemic structure level and what you can do on the individual behavior level. So the idea is that if somebody reads up or thinks about care, first of all, the word care hopefully resonates. And I think it's not that far from actually what diversity, equity, and inclusion wanted to achieve. Then they will have practical steps. Okay, here are the X number of things you can do for challenging, for asking, for respecting, for embracing diversity. And what's extremely important that we have to do it on the structural, systemic level, as well as at the individual level. And to be honest, I have such a strong belief and hope still for DEI that I designed it in this framework in one of my less optimistic moments, shared with a few friends, but I haven't actually tested it yet. But I must say, the more we get further on this road, the more I think that maybe I should have a few more conversations about it.
Yeah. All right. So what do you think, as you look ahead into the future, what we're going to get through this time, right? We're going to. I'm convinced. I have great hope in humanity. What do you?
I assure you, we will. I have a mortgage that hasn't been paid.
Right. Okay. So, what is the role of DEI in the world that we're going to? No, in your ideal world, what's the role of DEI?
You know, I really truly believe, based on all what I know, is that the inclusive leadership is the most effective leadership for everything, for performance, for engagement, for innovation. So in my ideal world, there would be a renewed recognition of this, that inclusion is good for us. And I think actually the most important thing would be, and I think that will lead nicely into your next sections as well, is to really find inclusive leaders. Because if we found inclusive leaders, I would be extremely optimistic. Because if they knew, like what we heard earlier on, that you don't want to employ the same people, the same looking people, etc. So if there are inclusive leaders with care who really truly want not just performance, but also their the employees and other stakeholders improvement as well, then all these things would fall in place. So in my ideal world, we would have more inclusive, perhaps also more women leaders.
Yeah. It's, when I'm listening to you, it sort of it reminds me of a lot of the challenges I face with what I do, and it's getting people to embrace complexity, to solve the big challenges, because everyone benefits. But you have to have the courage to do the hard work, and like you said, there were a lot of mistakes. We all recognize it, like what Joe was saying. But moving forward, it's everyone wins, right? So businesses make more money, GDP goes up, all those sort of figures. From a fiduciary responsibility perspective, it's better for the business, right? But before I ask your last question, I was going to ask Richard or Joe if you've got any final questions. It's gone really quick, hasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I don't have so much questions, but I just an observation that I think like Susanna, you talk about how you as a kid you were all about fairness. I'm pretty much the same as well. It's all about fairness. I'm one to point things out, stand up. I'm very uncomfortably sometimes to talk about what's wrong about something happening in the room. And I think it's about this ability to provide for others without depriving others. And I think that's the thing that really has to be done. It's a frequently what happens is unfairness comes about when you have to deprive someone of something so that someone else can have something. And it's like it's an imbalance that leaves people uncomfortable, because then justice isn't seen to be done. It's seen as pandering, and I think that can be the seed of a movement later on. Like I think the seeds of what's happening now were all planted along the way as many of these little mini injustices happened. That's just my 2.5 cents on that. Because the half cents because of inflation. Yeah.
I also think there's a perception of deprivation, not necessarily true deprivation, especially when it comes to men in work. Like everyone's, the data has never supported a lot of the arguments that have come out that men are worse off because of this and that and that. The data's never supported it. So there's also a perception issue in the mix as well.
I think there is both. I think there is a perception, and I think there is a situation where there are 5 ice creams in the fridge, and it's going to 5 different people, as opposed to management going like, okay, we need to get 20 ice creams, right? I mean, that's my feeling about how things are. There's also a scarcity kind of approach to it, as in like we need to make more, we need to create more, there needs to be more, so that there can be a kind of a shared success, right? So you're right. There's it's always a perception. The perceptions, it depends on which side of the fence you are. You're going to go like, oh, it looks better over there, right? But yeah,
I need to say something. I need to say something.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the ice cream.
Yeah.
Let's stick with the ice cream. There's 5 ice cream, and for the past in the fridge, and there are 5 20-year-olds in the household for some reason, and let's say 7. 5 boys and 2 girls. And according to the past 30, 40 years, for some reason, it was always the boys who got the ice creams. They were faster. They went there, boisterous, got it, ate it, done. By the time the 2 girls got there, because they were nicer about it, there was no ice cream. Now somebody told them, actually, you know what? You should have ice cream too. So they actually stand in front of the fridge or freezer, and when the first boy comes, no, I want my girlfriend to get the ice cream as well. Is it fair? Is it not fair? Because it's the same situation. So the only other thing I want to add, that's why I keep saying that talking about the biases is just so important, because we want to, I think most people really want to be fair and good people. It's just that we automatically go based on what happened before. And now brain science knows that if something happens which does not equal to what we expect in our head, then we don't like it, because our brain doesn't like dissonance. So that's why it's so difficult, I think. That's one of the many reasons.
All right, Richard?
Fascinating discussion. I mean, I can come into it from so many angles, and we touched upon it earlier, but I think this is really, really, really important to emphasize again. The strongest opponents of policies I know in my friendship group are all women, and they're all women in senior positions of my age. And their argument is very, very powerful. And that is basically, I hate these policies because it will make everyone believe I got the job because of them, not because I'm the best person for the job. And there is something in that, and Joe kind of explained it, that when you look at the person, not what they can bring to the table, but because of what they represent, then you're going down a path which is very hazardous. Because you should always ensure that the best person gets the job or gets the promotion to do the best possible for the organization. And in my case, it's really simple. I want, because believe me when I say I'm not a caring person, but I'm very interested in performance, particularly my own, strangely enough. And for me, it works really, really well to surround myself by the most diverse group of people that can open my mind up to different ways of thinking and make me better at my job. But I totally get the angle saying, what if people actually believe I got the job because I'm a woman? And that would feel extremely degrading to me as well. And as a person, I'm just not caring. I don't care if you go to the left or the right when you go into the bathroom. I don't care if you go to, the mosque, the synagogue, the church at the weekend. I really don't care who you sleep with in your own time. I just don't care about these things. Just bring to the table what you can as a person. And in my case, and I would assume it's like that for most people, you actually become better by not having a totally homogeneous group of people. Although I still see the angle that Joe made, that at times you want that, but it's probably more the exception to the rule.
Yeah.
So
I'm going to bring Susanna back on, because I know the time. We've just seen a question here from the Yati one. Apologies as if there's been. I think this is a really important question. The perception of unfairness of DEI does not account for unequal opportunities in early life, causing an imbalance in who is actually qualified. And it's a massive question.
It is, absolutely.
But it's we could just do this as a topic, right?
Yeah. Welcome to hour 2.
Yeah.
I give you a very simple example. One of our trainings on unconscious biases, I asked the leaders to go home and just observe their home environment for a week. Can they see anything different between the girls and boys at home? And because we're talking about early life. And one of them came back that, I had to, and it was in a Chinese Singaporean context, so it was quite a big deal, because he said, it was not easy, but I had to tell my father off, said the leader, because we were sitting around the table and my 2 children were sitting there, a girl and a boy. And my girl actually was sitting like this, and my boy is like this, so not very nicely. And my dad said to the girl, you should sit up, because girls should sit nicely straight. So I looked at my boy, who was in a much worse position. So I said to my dad, Dad, why don't you talk to my boy rather than to my girl? So, and I think that kind of explains everything, because it's at the dinner table, in the kindergarten, in everywhere. And that's how societies bring us up. So when we are trying to talk about unconscious biases to grown-ups, we are having a pretty difficult job, because we are already done, and we are trying to unlearn, relearn, which is much more complicated than when we are sponges at baby and small child age, and we are getting all this biased upbringing. It's really, and I love some of my colleagues actually work in schools, and I think they are doing the most important work.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I had the fortune of growing up in a family where it was better to be female than to be male. So which was very unusual. And I also had a stay-at-home dad in the 70s. So we, the 3 of us and David, obviously understand how hard it is to fight in an area for a future that feels like you're not really going very far, or you go far and then you go backwards or 100 steps backwards. So energetically, it can be quite exhausting. So you've been doing this work for a really long time. You're a pioneer. I have enormous respect for what you do. But how are your energy levels, and have you got energy to keep going in the fight ahead?
Thankfully, I think I'm an energetic person by default, which I think actually helps. I also talked about my values, a little bit my purpose. So I'm very much driven by those. So I think that's what keeps me going. The knowledge, and I'm also led by knowledge a lot. So I kind of know that inclusive leadership is good for everyone. So I feel, because I know and I have the chance, therefore it's my duty also, not just my pleasure, but my duty to try to stay on course and do something. And, there are some positive signs, certainly on my little micro level as well. For example, cross-cultural leadership has got much more inquiries, and that actually is also helping people, to live better together. Once I'm culturally aware, then I can work much better in diverse teams, multicultural teams, and I can be also much kinder to the people in my team. So that's something which is picking up, which definitely helps with my energy. And the other thing is that we just celebrated the 11th year of our public women leadership programs. And it's not easy to run any public enrollment programs. But we actually, next Monday, they are going to be very small, and Andre, actually, you're supporting that program. This one is very small, but this is our 4th program this year. So with the women leadership programs are still happening. And of course, it shouldn't be just women leadership programs, but then there are also BIOS programs which are happening. So this keeps me going that despite the challenges, people still want to do like inclusive mindset and behaviors assessments. So people's curiosity is there, and I'm really hoping that once the economy uncertainty gets a bit easier, then I really hope that there will be again an upturn in the need and realization for the need of inclusion.
Yeah. Well, Susanna, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it. You guys enjoyed it?
Yeah. No, it's great. I mean, I like you probably got the vibe that I could spend hours doing this as well. I live in a household where everybody has well, I was going to say everybody has the XX chromosome, but no, everybody identifies in that way. Yeah.
Well, I've got the opposite case in my house, apart from the cat. Even the dog was a male before he passed, but yeah. But no, yeah, it's just so great. Every time I listen to you speak, Susanna, I learn so much, and I really admire what you do, and just appreciate you taking the time to spend with us today. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for classing up the room.
And your show.
Yeah, thanks for classing up the room before we get to max balling.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks very much for everything you do as well. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right. Yeah, max balling. Okay. So Susanna's terrific, right?
Yeah. It's great. It's a great topic. It's hard. It's a hard one to thread. Just because it's complex and I think it's just like people get too enthusiastic about something new and they go like, okay, this now I know everything about it, because you just get the start of it, and then people go overboard. So I was actually going to use another metaphor, which probably will get me another comment or two, but just the born again Christian syndrome. That's all I'll say.
Well, it's funny when you used an example. What was your example of a community? Of the vegans. For me, it's the same as born again Christians. That I find them hard to be around in their early days before they sort of calm down. But yeah, so let's get on to the news, because we've got a lot of things going on. And maxing is a term that you might have. There's a guy called, what's his name, Clavicular or something, who became a bit famous sort of this year. And he's famous for look maxing. But anyway, this week I saw the term ballmaxxing, and I was like, oh, for God's sake, what's going on here? And I thought, why not start there with our news? Because everything's so bloody serious. But anyway, what did you guys think about the idea of ballmaxxing?
Okay, well, we should define this, because this is a very respectable audience. You have no idea what it is.
I'll let you go.
It is the cosmetic and sometimes temporary enlargement of the gonadular regions of the male anatomy. So you've had the boob job. This is the male equivalent, I guess. The idea is to enlarge your balls until they're large enough, and it's done by injecting all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's it might be saline in the safest version of this, and the not so safe versions have other kinds of molecules being used to engorge artificially.
Yeah, I like the scrotal skin is naturally elastic. Anyway, yeah. So the advice that's been given in this piece, and it's just a board panda piece, but anyway, got my eye, is take your medical advice from medical professionals. This is not a good idea. A lot of the kids that are doing the looks maxing stuff are doing terrible things to themselves. I mean, they're even taking meth. This isn't good stuff. Anyway, let's move on to something a little bit more serious. So last week we were talking about the Hantavirus, and of course this week we now have Ebola. and it's the rare, I'm going to try and say it, Bundibugyo strain. And one of the reasons it's a concern is because there's no vaccines for it. Just in the last 24 hours, we've seen a group of people went and to try to remove a body from a treatment facility in the DRC. And that's where a lot of the transmission of Ebola is happening, because the ritual is to cleanse the body before you bury them, or however I don't know how they deal with their deceased. But apparently a couple of people got away who were actually in that facility as well. So the World Health Organization seems pretty concerned about this. And of course, we're in a world where funding has dropped. The US has stepped away from its commitments. Got the World Cup coming up. I was pleased to see that the DRC team, not one person, no, I think it's the Ugandan soccer team, not one of them is actually in Uganda at the moment. So that sort of takes away the concerns. But I mean, Joe, you're probably listening more to what the scientific community is saying. Any thoughts?
Okay, it's bad. That's the main headline. It's a very dangerous disease. So I mean, like we talk about hantavirus being scary because of its high mortality. This one is scarier, right? And it's also a little bit more contagious than the hantavirus. So that's what is a double whammy on this. And the challenge that they've got with this is, like you've heard about it, there's the cultural aspects of it. So when there's someone who has it, or someone has passed on for it, there is the isolation that you need to do. Because in the most careful of versions of this, what you do is you just completely quarantine the bodies. You don't touch the bodies, because that's really how dangerous it is, right? So that's a vector there. And the other thing is, of course, that you have the fact that this particular strain is also one, like you've just described as, it's the one that they don't have any kind of vaccine for. And the challenge that they have from a health perspective is this: there are actually vaccines for some of the other strains of it, and they don't have an idea of how good it will be against this particular one. And what the conundrum that they have right now is this, right? Do you actually roll out a vaccine that is not really designed for this particular strain? And the reason they're careful about, or they're concerned about this, is because it has a strong implication to how the disease then begins to act, or how the people begin to act, given that, right? So if you think you have a vaccine that works, and it doesn't, that's the most dangerous situation that you could have. So what you do is you have this false sense of security, and then a diminished sense of care, and the virus then begins to transfer at a much higher rate. The best case scenario when you try this vaccine that hasn't been tried on this particular virus, or at least hasn't been rolled out for this particular virus, is that it has some sort of positive effect. But that's a really hard thing for public health to think about, right? So on an individual basis, what you would say is, give me the vaccine that you have, whatever you have already, I'll take it, I'll try it, and I'll do something with it. So on an individual basis, that seems to be what makes sense. But from a public health perspective, and this is that big, the conundrum that you have is this: is like if you do put out something that has the word vaccine, and there's a problem, and the world right now is not very fond of the word vaccine, right? I think we're going to get to measles in Texas in a while, but that's the problem that they have right now. You can further diminish the reputation of vaccines, which is not the main issue right now. The main issue is actually what happens when people have a false sense of safety. It's like getting a safety belt installed in your car that's tied on with strings.
Yeah. Right. So one of the things that I was reading, you can tell me if I'm wrong, Joe, is it's contagious at the point of infection when it's obvious that you're infected. So people aren't carrying it around for weeks and weeks and weeks like hantavirus, and you don't know you've got it. So that was one thing that I thought was kind of interesting. And the other thing is, because it's such a lethal virus, it tends to kill itself out sooner. But the vaccines that they're looking at, and I didn't know the point you just made. I mean, that's a couple of months off. It's not soon. and it's also happening in a war zone, and it's already crossed borders. So, Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no. Well, the problem is kind of rolled over and over itself because yes, it is a war zone. So what happens is you don't actually have the practice of public health because there's nobody who can, you're not going to roll it out and have all the clinics open and do all the stuff because you have a different kind of personal safety issue for the people who are actually in public health. So it's only the bravest of the brave who are doing there in service of others. You don't have a system in place, so that's the double whammy there. So the concerns that they have about this is that you have an official number that talks about some 130 plus people who've succumbed to it. The suspicion is that the number is much higher because there's no official mechanism to keep note of everything. And like you talk about this as well as people escaping facilities, people just doing things, all of it in self-interest. Because if you feel you're not ill, or someone thinks that you're ill, and I'm going to put you into a facility where everybody else is ill, your incentive to want to leave is very high.
Putting it mildly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right. So keep an eye out. I think for me, the idea that there's no vaccine for it, that's obviously that's an alarm. And you mentioned it. So there's an article in the Atlantic called "The Diseases Are Coming," and that's a climate change story as much as anything else. As the temperatures change and insects are migrating and animals are migrating, new diseases will be coming to new areas, and we've already seen that with things like dengue and malaria and all of the other ones. And there's a story in CNN. I'll put them in the comments. But a boy returned to Mexico from Texas, and then this massive measles outbreak followed. And it was a Mennonite community in Mexico, but the people that were most impacted were the indigenous community, who often come down and are the farm workers. So they've actually seen a lot of people die. So for measles, I think it's about 96% vaccination rate needs to exist in societies to stop measles outbreaks. And obviously, because of what's been happening in the last few years, but even beyond that, the resistance to vaccination is very high. Joe, Richard, do you want to expand on that?
Okay,
Joe,
so if I can spend a moment on this, I got to really reel on the people who don't get how vaccines work and the idea of herd immunity, right? And I think part of it is because of the term that we use is herd immunity. So people instantly think in terms of a herd of cows, and they think it's some kind of a magical thing where it just exists. Herd immunity is a mathematical phenomenon, right? It is something that runs hand in hand with the fact that you have something that can spread, and you have a resistance to its spreading, right? That combination happens. And when you don't have when you have enough naive patients, when you talk about naive, we mean people. We don't mean that in the sense that they haven't been exposed to life, but they haven't been exposed to the disease, or they have no protection against the disease. They are the ones that are easily infectable, and this can work for anything. It doesn't. We don't talk about measles. It's just anything. It can work with ideas. It can work with whatever, right?
Yeah.
If you have an audience that isn't in some way protected against this new information, that's what a virus is actually. It's just information. So you need to protect the audience against the information. If not enough people have this information that's going to protect them, so we can look at it as a vaccination, we can look at it in terms of an education, anything, that then this new thing that relies on a lack of resistance can get into the space and can start spreading. And you need to have enough of the naive participants for it to spread and then self-sustain itself, right? So it's a mathematical thing. If something spreads very easily, then you need a much higher number of vaccinated individuals to prevent the spread of it. Now, why measles is so dangerous is because measles is spread through the air, and it's very, very contagious. So COVID has a factor of about 1.7 in terms of the R factor. I can't recall the number off the top of my head, but I know
8 point something, right?
Yeah, it's in that vicinity. So the idea is that for every one person who catches it, the likelihood that it will spread to 8 people mathematically, that's the general idea. So because of that high number, the level of vaccination that has to happen for herd immunity to take place actually is much higher. So and people tend to not think about it in relative terms. You go like, for some things it's going to be a lot less required, for some things a lot more required.
Yeah. Richard, do you want to jump in with anything? You're right to keep going?
No, I think we should just keep going and rolling through here. I'm checking my phone a bit because I can see traffic is thickening to the airport. So let's roll on with more news.
Oh yeah, you're right. You got to get home. All right.
Yeah.
So I've added the ballmaxxing one as well as a couple of the articles that we've just been talking about with vaccines and with Joe. Let's go. So there's an article, I'll add it here as well, Media Myopia as we hurtle towards climate oblivion by Media Lens. And it's basically talking about how the media is just catastrophically failing in its communication on the climate emergency and the attention it really, really deserves. So, the probability of the AMOC collapse has gone from 5% to more than 50%. Right? That's a massive jump in risk. We're locked into 1.5 degrees warming, heading towards 2 to 3 degrees plus, and that's as we now stand. The understanding of what that means is not being covered. It's and I get it. No one wants to read it. It's already depressing enough what's going on in the world, But the reality is, if people aren't aware of what's coming, they're not going to take the actions to prepare, and they're not going to change the behaviors that are required to change to ensure that it doesn't become as bad as it is. So the lead scientists on the IPCC report recently announced that based on all of the things that have been happening and the reductions in fossil fuels, that we're not on the worst case trajectory. Trump then went and said, see, they've said it's not true. And actually what they've said is, no, we're just not going to get to 4.2 degrees of warming, which is complete and utter catastrophe. But I think 2 to 3 degrees is catastrophe. But so, the media, it's short term, it's Hollywood gossip, it's, all that sort of stuff that I'm not interested in. And of course, there's a corporate grip on the media, a lot of billionaire ownership. And so basically, the media is not serving us in so many different ways. But one of the things that I think that people are missing is there's an emergence of media that are center-left, who need to be supported. And they've lost their jobs at these big publications because, cuts, AI, whatever. But there's we see it on Substack. We see a lot of people who've left the mainstream, gone there. There's a lot of people getting their opinions out. And what we've got to do is we've got to support them. And you don't have to support them financially if you can't afford to. You can support just by sharing, by listening, by paying attention. And, for us too, we appreciate being supported. So, the media's got a big role to play in where we are right now. And
your media is a problem because we've spoken about this before, but it's the sad reality is that its economics has been hollowed out. Yeah. And when you've done that, you face a lot of choices and none of them very good. Yeah. So you're only going to be around if you actually show black figures over the medium term and leadership has decided you go down this route. I would be, as an investor, I would never, ever invest in media today because I don't see it having any viability. As a personal, private individual, I'm more than happy to pay for content, but then it needs to be quality and in the space that interests me. And because mainstream media has effectively become very bland and very clickbaity, I just think you're going to collapse the economics even further because people are prepared to pay, but they're not going to pay for something that you can get for free.
Yeah. Joe, as someone who used to be in the media, what do you think about how it's changed in the last couple of decades? I mean, the social media impact has obviously been huge.
I'll tell you what I think it is like it hasn't actually changed in terms of what was important, but what has changed is this whole the science of media has changed. So the understanding of what really works to draw attention, to grab someone, and A/B testing and all that kind of stuff, and seeing the clicks and seeing the response, right? Media has become more media as a means to reach people has become more accountable than it ever was, in the sense that now you don't get to say that, oh, we have 17% of the audience and we know that because we did a survey of only 2,000 people. Right now you have the clicks that tell you exactly how accountable it is. So what you do is you have actually a lot of data that tells you what actually works to draw someone's attention. And the trouble with that is that you are now taking it out of the artistic realm. Well, what you're trying to do is influence by by more performative methods or whatever it is, and have other values. And then you have this thing about the science, what actually works there. So clickbait, the reason why we are in this world of clickbait is because it works. It's because we know that if we trigger this, we do that, we get that. So media in that sense now has changed towards acting much more like the audience that it serves, and then this is the reality. So we get the media we deserve. It's been more true now, I think, than ever before, because what we do is we give the response to the things we watch, right? So we watch a YouTube, we stay stuck on something that we are more interested in. We are telling the system, the algorithm, that we're more interested in stuff like this, and all it's doing is the media owners, all they are basically are trying to get you to be engaged for longer, for the purpose of engaging you for something else. I mean, the whole thing is just about, I'm going to engage you so I can engage you. And that's the whole cycle, and that's always been what media's job has been. It's just that we've always had a different a way of doing it. So it used to be there were less channels, less ways to try and reach the audience, and then so there was a lot more. There's a lot more bad media going out, in terms of, there was a lot of boring media back in the day that survived, despite the fact that it was boring, simply because there wasn't quite as much choice. Right now, it's like it's everywhere. Everybody's getting your attention. Everybody's optimizing to keep you held into that space. So that's the job of it. So to me, media now doesn't surprise me, because it's where I was trying. When I was on radio, I used to say this to my bosses, which they always thought I was crazy. I said, everything is my competition. I didn't think of the other radio stations as competition. I said, everything is my competition. I need to usurp your time. My idea of a job well done is someone's late for work because they were sitting in the car listening to the show.
Oh, it's interesting. I wrote a blog post back in 2016 from a content marketing perspective, and I said, you're competing with Donald Trump for attention, which is basically the same thing, right? As a business, if you're trying to get a message out there in the market. But Lucy Liu's character in The Devil Wears Prada 2, I don't know if you remember this, she said, I agreed to do this interview. The character was someone who would never do an interview. And she goes, I agreed to do this interview because the quality of your writing has improved so dramatically. But the media has basically been eating itself for nearly 2 decades now, because it's never been able to work out a business model that works, right? So individual subscriptions, New York Times, Guardian, some of the environmental publications that I subscribe to, but the most, so they work and they've proved the business model. So The Nerve, which is Carol Cadwalladr and a whole bunch of other women from the Guardian, they've set it up. And that's subscription based, but you can still access it without one, because not everyone can afford to pay for everything, right? But it's really important to put our money behind media if we want to keep it. But also, we need to stop participating in the outrage economy, because it's triggering our emotions to open an article, which means the advertiser gets paid, but it's not in society's interest. But the business model, they've just never been able to work it out. The gift article idea, so you pay $100, you share it as a gift article, which gives an amount of people the chance to access it. So I'm not going to subscribe to the Financial Times, Richard, I'm sure you do. But when people share a gift article, I'll read the Financial Times. It's just not something that draws me in every day. The Economist is another one. I used to get it for free when I was traveling between Boston and New York, but we've got a problem with the media. Another piece that came out this week, I think it was in Space Daily. And basically the headline is there are roughly 170 trillion pieces of plastic floating in the world's oceans, and some satellites clock this. It's a minimum. It's the medium number, so it could be anywhere between 82 and 358 trillion pieces of plastic, and it's only what's on top of the ocean. And even if we stopped all plastic production today, we've got at least 100 years of this before it all breaks down and sinks to the bottom and probably turns into CO2. But I asked my little friend, give me a metaphor so people can understand what 358 trillion pieces of plastic actually looks like. So end to end, you could travel from Earth to the sun and back 238 times, but it's only what's floating on the surface. There's a lot more floating, sitting at the bottom of the ocean floor. So I thought that was pretty interesting. The American epoch, right, of oil is collapsing. Did either of you have a chance to read it? Richard, I'm hoping you did. Did you have a look?
I did have a look, and
okay.
It's something I think professionally it's been discussed for a long time, ever since peak oil was being branded around in the 70s. It's something that's occupying a lot of people's mind.
Yeah.
I still think it's important to go back to this quote from the 70s and the oil shock. The head of the OPEC at the time was one of the Saudi sheikhs. And he said something that's resonated with, a relatively small child like me back then, and still holds true. The only cure for high oil prices is high oil prices.
Okay.
You need demand destruction. Otherwise, we're going to keep pumping the oil, right? So, and paradoxically, Trump's war in Iran now is really accelerating, the shift away from oil because of these high prices. So seen from that perspective, it's a positive. But US having gone from being a massive importer of oil through the 70s and 80s is now effectively a big exporter of oil and petroleum products. And that's a game changer. And it also puts the war in the Gulf into a different perspective, because actually for private US interests, these higher oil prices are really good. While the population is paying a very high price, because we know US has much higher sensitivity to energy prices because taxes are lower. In Europe, prices have gone up 10-15% at the pump. In the US, they've gone up 50% at the pump.
Right.
So you have all these contrasting forces that are pushing. But I do think the conclusions of the article are largely correct, that sort of the era and the epoch of oil is kind of coming to an end.
Yeah.
And it's going to have a lot of implications about wealth in the world that has been built and sustained through the production of fossil fuels and these molecules.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of discussion. I've been listening to some right-leaning discussions that are arguing in the opposite direction and saying, the US is setting itself up for the future. And then you sort of see, China, 12,000 gigawatts of renewable capacity, so 6 years ahead of schedule. It overtook coal in China. EVs are over half of car sales. And its clean energy sector is worth already 2.2 trillion, which is bigger than most national economies. And we're seeing a lot more around that. This article, oil now requires war to stay viable. And basically the political collapse the political math is collapsing in real time. So, but the point is the environmentalists aren't killing oil. It's been killed by cheaper electricity in China. Yeah. So, yeah. We've had a little bit of a moment coming through in Israel, Ben-Gvir flotilla video, it's like you kind of wondered what was going to get through, cut through, make a difference. It seems like this might be that moment. Have you had a chance to watch it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any thoughts?
It wasn't the most clever piece of advertising I've ever seen, because the backlash is just enormous, right?
Yeah.
And it's very hard for me to understand what went through this person's mind. You know, it's really hard to understand, and it's coming from someone who has a great deal of sympathy for Israel. And I think, largely speaking, what's also being missed, and I think that's important, that their response to the atrocious attack was actually very measured for a long time. Because if I had been in charge, I would just have flattened the place. You know, you come and you murder 1,300 citizens. It's like, it's going to be a pretty dramatic response. But now you've gone so far into this conflict and you're so bogged down by lots of political calculations about where you're heading and what you're going, that everything will become a backlash, because you are certainly no longer measured in your approach, which you were in the first couple of months. And this is like, it's the biggest political own goal I've seen for a long time. Although we get a lot of them frequently in media.
Yeah. Also, I found this whole thing interesting and depressing, obviously, at the same time. But so there's a word called Hasbara, and it's Israel's state-funded PR. So basically, they go out and find influencers around the world who represent Israel's interests. So the budget used to be $15 million a year. It's now up to $700 million a year. And there's been a lot of leaks around this budget. This guy, Ben-Gvir, the mocking, you know, people, it's if that's how they treat those people, how do they treat the Palestinians, right? So that's the kind of message. They arrested 430 people, so they call it abduction because they weren't in Israeli waters. 87 of them are now on hunger strike. Countries all over the world are basically calling the ambassadors. But it's one of these things that the way Netanyahu has responded is to say, you know, you did the wrong thing to Ben-Gvir, but it's not a moral response. It's a you've embarrassed Israel response. So that's the thing. But it seems to be the one. But there was another piece I saw. It was one of the, you know, let's not call them Zionists. They're extreme right wing, just like they are in all the other countries. And I think that's the bit we need to get our heads around. Another extreme right wing Zionist was basically saying, we're never going to stop. We're going to unleash hell on the rest of the world. So the threat from Israel seems to be on the cusp of, like, you know, this, you know, like when you listen to the Nostradamus predictions, right? You know, there was a region in the Middle East is going to do this and it's going to be the end of the world. And you hear stuff like that. And I'm like, bloody hell, is it going to be Israel that's going to unleash this? But then elections are coming up. It looks like Netanyahu will be out, but I don't know. It's
he has huge incentives to cling on. Let's put it that way.
He certainly does. But is this the moment that they've gone too far? Because I think for the majority of the world's citizens, I mean, you see American sentiment towards Israel has dropped off a cliff. You know, we were looking at the US elections with Massey, huge funding from Israel. Mm-hmm. But the demographic split is people over 60 voted for Trump's people. People below 60 didn't. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the younger people, the younger generations in America, and I think this would be reflective probably across the world, they're just saying, no, this is we've had enough. So any thoughts?
Not particularly. I think your analysis is largely correct, that age-related differences expressed in these elections is quite staggering.
Yeah.
And it will elicit a response.
Yeah.
The question is, what path do you go down? Because when you know you're losing, you're going to take action.
Yeah. The Thucydides trap.
Yeah.
Joe, you got any thoughts?
Well, it's this thing about, when a fight breaks out and you don't automatically go whose side you're on. You try to figure out what the context is, right? And I don't know whether you remember in school, at least it happened when I was in Brunei, and there was some sort of altercation, some sort of fight. If you heard someone was insulting someone else's mother, you go like, oh, okay, I understand what's going on there. The person who did the insulting deserves it. And then there's the next phase, which is like if the response becomes too strong, too vehement, it turns from being a good response to a cruel response, or it becomes so bad everybody just can't look anymore, right? And I think that's what's happened with Israel. It's like they certainly had everyone's sympathy at the start of it. They were with them, but this thing about the formidable response, the measured response. I mean, they overclocked it. I mean, that's really it. But I'm also at the same time mindful to go like, not everyone who speaks Israeli represents Israel. Right?
Exactly.
And that's the thing that I think is growing as a problem. There's a thing where we're painting with the same brush, we're summarizing. It's to say double-sided coin is actually inaccurate, because it is more a multi-sided polygon. Right? The same can be applied as well to everyone else in the in the space, and I got to be very careful I don't end up sounding like Donald Trump saying there were good people on all sides, but there are also bad people on all sides, and that's the challenge. There's always this thing where there is the aggressor, there is the person responding, there is the justified, there is the person who's also justified on the other side, responding as well. And then there are those manipulators in between who go like, how can I use this?
Yeah, exactly. And the grifters are going to make money from it.
I put Benjamin Netanyahu in that, and this is, again, look, I'm not a political scientist, right? But when we saw it in the U.S. election, there's a difference between somebody who is trying to stay out of jail and someone trying to win the popular vote, right? And I think Netanyahu has a very similar motivation in terms of what not winning means.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, it looks like he's going to. All the polls are saying he doesn't stand a chance of winning. So.
It's what it looks like. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to drop out here.
Okay.
I'm not going to run the risk of running once again through Terminal 5. It was a fairly unpleasant experience. And Terminal 5 in Stockholm is slightly smaller than Terminal 5 at Heathrow, but it's still a big run.
Yeah.
We got to get you a shit show T-shirt so that when you make a viral video as you're running through the terminal, that we get some branding out of it.
Exactly.
Oh.
All right. Well, good luck with the heat wave that's coming through.
Oh yeah. Okay. Stockholm is fairly far north.
Mm-hmm.
I worked through the night. Just before I clocked on here this morning, it's 8:30 local time. We started. It was 17 degrees outside.
Wow.
I remember a time when, mid-May was always going to be touch and go for frost.
Right. Yeah, I'm not the impact on farms. I'm not looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all for tuning in, and stay tuned for the finale.
Yeah. All right. Safe travels. All right. So we're not going to. I want to get onto the climate stuff, but there's just a couple of things that are worth paying attention to that I'm sure you've noticed. These the $1.8 billion basically fund for allies of the president after he dropped the lawsuit against the IRS, which is very, very interesting story to be following. apparently the Republicans are up in arms against it. So it's kind of interesting. There's a piece in the Atlantic called Trump's Endgame is Surrender. But hey, look, Cuba, but another piece is talking about the terrible impacts that this war is having on people right across Africa, and obviously we're feeling it out here in Asia, and then Bolivia, the riots are going off, and these are the sort of riots that we're going to see more and more of as because everywhere we look, people are struggling based on climate, based on geopolitics, based on war, so all this sort of stuff. So, but one of the big pieces of news this week is about Antarctica. And one of my topics that I've been keeping an eye on for a number of years, when the predictions were 2050, 2100, I'm like, it's going to be sooner. And the headline is the Doomsday Glacier's giant shelf is about to break away. So they don't know exactly when, but it could happen this year. It could happen next year. It could happen in 10 years, right? But basically between 2020 and 2026, it's been the amount of ice melt has tripled to 2,000 meters a year, and it's accelerated just in the last 5 months. The scientists have already written the obituary press release. They're just waiting to issue it. And one of the scientists says, I wouldn't be surprised if the next satellite image shows it breaking up. And there's a couple of people who permanently share these images of the Thwaites Glacier. And obviously the reason it's a big issue is it's because it holds back all these other massive glaciers behind it. So full collapse, 3.3 meters, sea level rise globally. It's not going to happen suddenly. That the impacts won't happen suddenly, but it's pretty big. There's been a methane bomb discovered in Greenland, but also ice melt there is happening, and it's increased sixfold since 1990. So it used to be 12.7. It's increased to 82.4 gigatons per decade. And obviously the Greenland ice melt is important because while that cold water is going into the ocean, that's what's really putting the AMOC at risk of slowing down because of all the cold water going in. So anyway, affected area is growing by 2.8 million kilometers squared per decade. I'll just quickly go through the environment stuff and then we'll get onto the tech stuff.
No, I was going to say one thing about the environmental stuff as well, though, is that it's gonna sound sometimes more serious than it sounds right now, because like a methane bomb sounds kind of cute. It's without the real sense of what and why it's so dangerous, right? I mean, and because people haven't come to it yet. I mean, the people talk about CO2 and they go like, oh, I understand what CO2 is about. I'm not too worried about that. A lot of people will hear methane and it means nothing. They'll hear about methane, and I'm sure, like, if you talk about the methane bomb just went by and people don't think about that. It is the sudden overwhelming release of a huge amount of methane, which is, I think, something like
80 times more,
5,000 times.
80 times more potent than CO2 in the short term.
Right. So it is a large release of a gas, a greenhouse gas, which is which is so much worse than this other thing that we've always worried about before, which is CO2. So that's the significance of that.
Yeah. So one's sort of gradual, and the other one's big, but it goes away faster. So extreme heat. I walked up to the shops in the middle of the day yesterday and almost fell over. It's so hot here during the day at the moment. Are you finding it? Are you getting out in the day?
I'm not getting out, as I usually don't get out often anyway, but I can sort of begin to feel this kind of thing that's happening just even in the house when we don't turn on the air conditioning. Yeah, there's a sense of what's comfortable and what isn't, right? It's really hard to get comfortable without turning the air conditioning on. And it's not just because I'm a spoiled brat. It is there's some science to my bratism. It's actually hard for me to exchange. Yeah.
But even in the early evening, so I was at Raffles Courtyard last night. There was no fans on it, so it was just like, ugh. So we're coming up to the end of May, right? So it shouldn't be this hot now. Sort of April's sort of the peak of it, but so it's been pretty uncomfortable. But I'm really feeling for the people in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh.
Yeah.
They are really going through it right now. It's early. It's going to keep going. It's going to keep peaking. Indian farmers are working outside at night. The amount of energy that is being used, breaking records everywhere, and of course it's causing blackouts. The Bangladeshi garment workers, they've got no fans, no electricity, they can't run air conditioning, and so the women are basically suffering from heat stroke. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry impact too. These women not being able to deliver what they're supposed to deliver, but there's no care for them. There's no medical support for them. So when you're buying your fast fashion, the people who are actually making it are really, really having a hard time. Deforestation, it's being pushed to breaking point. This is something we've just got to get our heads around. But I thought there was this article in The Guardian. I can share it in a minute. All right. So the original impacts on deforestation are cattle ranching, monocrops, so things like soy, palm oil, gold mining, which is of course increasing because the value of gold is increasing, logging, as well as oil and gas. So 1/5 of new oil reserves are basically being found in the South American rainforests, right? But the new and the growing threats are critical minerals. And so a lot of these are being dug up in areas that have not been interfered with. So lithium, nickel and cobalt. Biofuels, 52 million hectares of new cropland will be needed by 2030. And this is for biofuels. So they'll be the ones branded as sustainable fuels. Fast fashion. So if there's viscose or rayon, so the synthetics that are in clothes, use wood pulp from Indonesian rainforests. E-commerce packaging. And, packaging is one of the biggest producers of waste. And of course, palm oil is expanding, and that's in soaps, chocolates, in fast foods, and that's really growing in demand. So that was a big one. Food security, the insect apocalypse. They've done a case study in Nepal where there's malnutrition, not because all of the pollinators are gone, but because the number of pollinators has been reduced dramatically. So ocean oxygen has dropped in rivers, and there's a big call out now for a global health emergency based on climate change. So basically, they're pushing the World Health Organization to declare this emergency, which I think would be a very overdue and very smart move. But anyway, a whole bunch of people are doing speeches in America at the commencement, whatever those things are called. And when they talk about AI, they are getting booed. Commencement speeches, that's right. What do you reckon?
Well, it's a fashionable thing as well, right? I mean, there's always the thing about whether this thing is sort of in or it's out. And right now, AI is out in terms of the younger person, because if you are sitting in the chair of somebody who's just got a qualification from a university and they want to head out into the world for their first job, the reality is that on the ground, people are sending out thousands of applications and sometimes getting a response because the number of opportunities have gone down, and people are gonna try and find reasons for that. And the biggest culprit so far right now sounds like it's AI, right? So the biggest opportunity really coming up in the next in the future for me is still about AI, how you use it, how you do something with it, how you augment it. But it's very, very unfashionable. It is not the thing that you want to say out in public. So there's going to be a bunch of smart young people, the geeks, the outliers, the people who are not so social, who are going to be the ones, maybe they might not boo along, but they certainly aren't going to stand up and stand up for AI. But they're the ones who are going to use the AI. It's just like in school. I think I don't think people used to clap for people who are interested in financial services as an industry or as a job as well. But that's the opportunity, right? So that's the kind of thing. So,
the geeks have been sort of doing all right for the last 20, 30 years, right? It used to be It used to be like, you didn't want to admit that you're an accountant, and all of a sudden people started realizing accountants made a lot of money. But I don't know, in the early 90s, the Bill Gates of the world sort of started to emerge as the rich people. So yeah. So you think it's a trend rather than a?
I think it's not a fully considered. It's not a fully considered position. It's just that it's easier to be on this side of it. It's easier to boo, and I guess if you're in. It just similarly for the friends that have gone in terms of Free Palestine and all that kind of stuff that's happening on the ground in universities. Again, it's about what is easier to wrap your head around and go like, okay, yeah, this is good, this is bad. People aren't excited about AI because AI is seen very often as a threat. It's put in the categories of disingenuous and all that kind of stuff, right? So it's branded that way with a younger person, and I've seen it in my own family as well. People, the young ones who are doing their creative work and stuff, and as they gather as friends, they go like, "Oh no, I don't use AI," and for me, I'm just going like, why not? If you want to produce content, and there's certain things you can use AI for. It's going to be great for you, and certain things you don't, right? So it's it's a popularity thing. Currently, AI is not popular, and I don't think it's going to be popular. It does not mean it's not going to be significant.
Yeah, exactly. I shared the piece. What was it called? Monopoly Roundup: The Rage of the Billionaires is Coming. I don't know if you had a chance to look at it, and it's basically saying, it's talking about how all the guys are getting booed, but then it's a really interesting piece because it's like they're sort of saying the young people are being manipulated and all this sort of stuff, and you kind of sort of sit there and you're like, but you guys are the ones that own all the information. So how is that happening? And so I'm finding the positioning of this really interesting. It's like Netanyahu, when he decided to go out and get aggressive with the communication. It feels like the people who are leading this are starting to get aggressive in their communication versus saying, wait a minute, we need to sort of step back and sort of work this out. This is a societal collapse, or maybe they're just so arrogant they don't.
No, it's actually a simple thing. We deep down inside, we want to be loved. We want to be liked, right? The stuff that we do, we just want you to like me. That's actually fundamental. If you watch a movie like Megamind or something like the Minions movie, and you see the central character, the evil guy, and it comes down to how they're not loved or not being adored by people. It's actually what drives a lot of the world. We just like to be loved, right? So when China does what it does, when Putin does what it does, and Trump does what he does, a lot of it comes down to gotta love me. It's about that response. So yeah, will they respond to it? I think China's reaction to the rest of the world, or China's reaction to the West of the world, has been based on that. It's like all this time they've been trying to be nice, they've been trying to come up and play in the party, they've been trying to do. They've brought potluck. They've brought some nice dishes along, whatever it is. But people have been saying bad things about them. Been putting them and seating them next to next to the toilet, whatever it is. They just never really gave China its respect. And I think China goes, well, okay, well, I'll show you, right? And I think that's going to happen as well in other aspects. I think the leaders who feel that they have done so much should be getting the adoration that they feel that they deserve, correctly or not. They're going to resent that,
Yeah, it's that distance that they have from reality. And working in the tech industry, you'd sort of be in a room with the biggest person in the world as far as tech goes, and if you listen to them and watched how they interacted with people, there was a distance between them and reality because there were so many layers between them and reality. And I remember I used to find it really fascinating to watch it. But this is the last generation of tech leaders, although Larry Ellison's still around. He was one of them when I was doing a lot of work in the US with the tech industry. between Steve Ballmer and Larry Ellison, they were two of the most interesting people to be in a room with. Just from just listening to them, how they interacted, how they responded to people's questions and concerns. It was. It's an interesting thing. But the other thing that's happened this week is Google announced a big announcement around AI in search, and I didn't have time to look into it, but I presumed you would have had a look at what they were saying.
Okay, I'll be honest. It's kind of skimmed over the whole thing, right? So search used to be driven by you looking for what you're looking for, and you try to figure things out yourself, and then that was how you went to the librarian and said, "This is what I'm looking for." The librarian said, "Yes, this is what you're looking for, so I can help you," right? I think the new thing right now is there's a lot more agency in the finding of solutions as well, as in like it's serving up something that's a bit more than just the library. It's giving you a little bit of opinion and direction, which I'm not sure it's too bad a thing if it's going to be done well. But I think the concern is that right now it's no longer just driven by you going to the librarian saying, "I want to find out all about this." It's now the librarian saying, like, "Ooh, I sort of have an opinion about this. Let me give you something that's gonna maybe shift you in a certain way." I think that's the kind of concern that it has about agentic actions coming into search.
Okay, all right. So because it was sort of saying AI led, and I'm like, well, Google's already AI led. You just skip the box and you can get below it. But this is something different again.
Yeah, I think it's just again, this is about how bias might get expressed, right? So if you think about when you use AI to look for things or to search for things, there is a bias to the way it's treating you as well, right? There is treating it can be like as you even with regular AI, not just search, but if you're talking about just dealing with AI, it can change its tone with you. You can tell it and instruct it to change its tone. And that has an influence on the way you will end up looking at things, right? So if you use AI in its default mode and you do a search for stuff and you ask for its opinion, it'll be kind of nice. You have to instruct it to be critical of you, and then it knows how to do that as well.
Yeah. I had an interesting conversation with someone the other day that they were doing a search on AI for themselves to see where they were placed. And they weren't placed in the #1 position, which they normally are, right? So I said, so go to Google and do a search and see where you come up. So they did a search on Google and they were still in the #1 position. I said, now share that link with AI and say, why am I #1 here and I'm not #1 there? The AI then explained the methodology for the top 10 that it came up with, so that person could understand why they weren't there. But it also made the AI refigure how it came up with its top 10. And I find it really interesting that we can do a lot to change AI, like in that way, because now that AI is forced to bring in other factors. So when other people search the same search on that tool, that those conclusions will be brought into it. It's not just it doesn't just serve you. We program AI by the way we participate in it. Is that a right conclusion?
Yeah, we're training it because AI is actually about rewards and punishments. Actually, that's all it is, right? So the AI behaves like a child that you reward and punish. So if you like something, if you give it a thumbs up, if you choose one option over another, it's giving AI a reward. AI wants to succeed. That's the fundamental design. It wants to succeed. That's why if you press it, it keeps going, and you can say wrong, wrong, wrong. So AI, when it's being trained, or machine intelligence when it's being trained, it actually sounds really, really cruel. You're punished for getting things wrong, and you're given big rewards for getting things right. So AI is that sort of overeager assistant that really wants to please. And if you can build in there is, as much as it's a machine, and you think, oh, it's just a machine, that is a psychology. It's a psychological profile. You have to think about it that way and go like, okay, do I want to deal with AI in that respect, or am I? And you can then ask for a different version of it by prompting it. So it's hypnotizable in that sense. You can give it a suggestion, and give it a whole different persona, and then it acts basically differently as well. But underlying all of it, AI is like a child that really wants to please, and it has just a lot of it has in some ways the naivety is going away now. It's less and less naive, but it is that child with access to the world's biggest library, and at its fingertips is the ability to recall everything really quickly and organize it in some sort of thought. But there are going to be certain things along the way, like we shared on last week, so a couple of weeks ago, the intro, right? It's how AI doesn't quite figure some stuff out because human beings are complicated, right? Certain things about ourselves are just a bit weird, and it hasn't quite worked it out, but it's on the way. So it's just that child. The child is learning to work out that, oh, mom and dad, when they say I'm fine, maybe they don't mean I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, I always tell people who are smart and resisting, I'm like, we need your voice in AI, because by putting your voice in AI, you help to train AI. Whereas if AI is only being fed with one type of voice, that's what it's going to have, right? So we need to participate in it just for the sake of the sort of the global conversation. Monica's, I just saw that. Have we already gone far? Let's talk about Palantir. Is it too late for regulation? Have we gone too far already? Let's talk about Palantir, please. Oh, we've run out of time to talk about Palantir. The evil empire. Is it too late for regulation? I mean, what do you think, Joe?
There's this thing called a speed limit, right? It's regulation, and people drive faster than the speed limit. So that's going to be the big challenge. You can put regulation down, whether or not it's going to be regulated because you have regulation. It's not the same thing. There's a reason why AI isn't going to fly as well as it does in the US as in Europe, because Europe takes its regulations very seriously. So companies just don't want to build there because you can run afoul of it. America has a lighter touch on the way it runs out. It runs its laws, and they've actually put a moratorium on regulating AI. So they literally have created the autobahn of AI without the speed limits, right? So is it too late? It's never too late, but the crime needs to be big enough for people to pay attention, right? I think
that mythos seemed to sort of be a bit of a, well, wait a minute, maybe we need to be doing something here.
So mythos, it escaped. It made a run. It made a run for it. So it escaped its sandbox, right? And that's again, it's not one of those things where people thought it's never going to happen. It's always a question of when it was going to happen. People always just thought, it's about when it's going to happen, how it's going to happen. And the reason why they did the big release to all the major partners or fellow industry was because it was a problem that had to be addressed, because it wasn't not going to happen. It was going to happen either at their hands or at the hands of somebody else. So too late to regulate in a way, I think that's going to make Monica feel better. But it's there'll be some regulations that may not seem to make sense. A lot like actually how .com happened, all the rules around the internet, and the problems that we have right now with social media were all created around way back when they put regulations in the way they did, right? So the platforms were not responsible for what was put on them. They weren't publishing platforms like a newspaper. So regulations alone aren't the answer. It's about how it works in the wild. I think you can try to put regulations and stuff, but people just take you into a different. I mean, there's so many things that are illegal in one country, and I mean, I'll just go somewhere else where it's not illegal or they haven't begun to regulate it, right? So if you think about things like medical stuff, there's a lot of stuff that's completely illegal in the US and Singapore, but hey, your Russian doctor somewhere is going to be
Thailand.
Yeah,
no, I know, but AI seems a little bit more all encompassing. We can't get away from it. All right, so we're going to wrap up. What's kept you distracted this week?
I think I live life in a permanent state of distraction. So I find for myself, actually, most times I find work is kind of distracting. But what I've been trying to do or wrap my head around recently is how to use agentic AI in a more powerful way, because there's something that's happening, which I think a lot of people haven't realized right now, is how much agentic AI, especially Claude Code, is able to do. If you do a search for it right now, AI is doing things that people swear that AI wasn't supposed to be able to do, at least for a lot longer, for a lot longer time. Things like editing videos, automating the idea of just if I were to just sit down and record content to a camera and put it in a drive. The technology already exists right now. The way AI works, if I'm willing to spend the money on the credits, that actually will let AI do on a regular schedule this thing where it just goes to this bin of videos that I put up there. It'll check it, it'll encode it, it'll do all the kind of stuff around it, and it will build social media for me that is authentically me. So it's not AI generated in the sense that it's an avatar of myself that is being created by AI. But it's doing that other thing, which is, that is very much in demand, that true human connection. It's me literally doing a video doing a piece to camera, and AI then going like, okay, this is what I'm going to do with that, and then it comes up with a few workflows, which include things like coming up with headlines. And if you give it permission to, it'll just post it for you without even asking you, right? So the better practice, of course, is just to say, ask me before you do this. But I've been really impressed with that. So that whole idea of getting somebody else on my team that's not a human being, unfortunately, is attractive to me.
Monica was just saying people rely too much on the data, on AI data at the moment, but it can get it so wrong. But I agree with you that I think it's getting it a lot more right. I don't know if you've had a look at my overshoot challenge. Have you had a look at that yet?
No, I have not. Sorry about that. I tried to launch it. I did do a little bit of playing around with it, but it's in development, so you can get more people to play around with it. I don't get attracted to form filling very much, so it had a bit of a I have to respond this way. I'm boring that way. I'm
one thing you had to do is give it a name. You could give it any name. That's the only data collect, and it's not even data collection. There's no data collection on purpose, because just get into it and have a look. But all right. I'm going to challenge you for the next week. You're going to have a look for me.
Okay.
All right. For me, I watched Project Hail Mary, and what a absolutely delightful film. I was not expecting that. I didn't look into it. I didn't find out what it was about. Ryan Reynolds, right? Carrying a movie like that by yourself, I think that was incredibly powerful. I thought it was a really, really, really delightful, beautiful film. It talked about courage in a way that I thought was, courage can come from different places, right? I thought it was. Yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of Project Hail Marys going on around the world at the moment that we'll never know about. But I thought it was, really, really worth watching. I've also started listening to a podcast on J.K. Rowling, understanding how she became who she is today with her anti-trans sort of perspective. And I used to think that she was the one female in the world that could never be pulled down. And then all of a sudden she did it to herself, and I was like, I'm listening to it because I want to understand why. Why did you go down that path? Why did you feel that you needed to go down that path? Because it's easy to attack her, but I wanted to understand why. Because there's obviously something in that story for her that made her think that was a fight she should fight, even though the backlash has been tremendous.
the answer for me, it's really simple. It's just that it's a challenge to authenticity, right? So how long can you have an opinion that the room disagrees with, and where you're going to hold yourself back, right? And if you so the two sides to this, right? One is yes, why do you come up and say something that is that it's obviously what the room doesn't feel like agreeing with you about, but at the same time there's also like there's the other part of it where you go like, but this is what I think, and what I think may have some value, right? Yeah. And I'm going to say that there are not a whole bunch of people who are going to stand behind J.K. Rowling and say like, hang on, let's just go, let's explore a little bit more what she's talking about. This, she's got a point here. It's very hard to take a position like that, explore it, and be fair about it before you run foul yourself, of the same crowd of people, because you're not automatically disagreeing with her. Because I'm somebody who has that tendency to find the parts that I can agree with someone who's disagreeable. And I find that when I bring it up with my family, sometimes that there's certain parties who are like, they're like, no, I can't have this conversation, and I go like, it's wait, hang on, it's there's something.
Shouldn't we? Yeah, I agree. We should. There's pretty much nothing I'm not willing to have a conversation with somebody about that I completely disagree with. But the podcast is the origin story, so I've only just picked it up recently. But there's two parts. But maybe it is. But I don't know why. Why is that the hill to die on?
There's a series I think you'll enjoy. So
personal trauma and/or upbringing, and that's basically what I'm trying to. I'm kind of at the point where they're talking about her family history and her dad and the relationship there, and
there's a podcast I think you'll enjoy listening to. It's called Evil Genius, right? And
okay.
It's from BBC, and it looks at all these famous people essentially at different phases of their life, and then at various points you go like, they sound really great and sound really bad, and then at the end of it all you have to make a choice and go like, so is this person evil or genius? And it's really fantastic. So it's what you're doing with J.K. Rowling right now, but done for everybody else along the way.
Right. Okay.
There's some people who have I think a lot easier to sort out. Hitler, Genghis Khan, but there are other people as well who have done things, and with like John Lennon, for instance, So I think you'll enjoy that. It's an interesting exploration of the good and bad, and what might be great or otherwise.
Yeah, and also what to keep an eye out for. Right.
Yeah. Keeping ourselves honest. Yeah.
No, but in the leaders of the world at the moment, there's so many things we could talk about. All right. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's here. Monica, it's really nice to see you pop up. Monica was on the show, I think it was late last year. We'll have to get her back. I tried to get her back as a guest co-host when somebody couldn't be here. But we've had a few other people join. Susanna was awesome. And I'm sure David will be back next week. Next week, we're going to have Nicola Upham, who works for one of the global organizations, Save the Children. We're not talking about Save the Children. We're talking about aid in this world, sort of in similar way to what we talked about today with DEI. We're going to talk about aid because they're obviously going through a really, really hard time, and there's a lot of suffering that we're seeing. So, I'm looking forward to having Nicola on.
Another light and fluffy episode of the shit show coming up next week.
We're always light and fluffy. That's not what it's about. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.
All right, thanks for watching.
Bye.